Hello again from the HardDrive Studios in New York City. My name is Lou Brutus, and Tobias Forge of Ghost is my guest. If you wouldn't mind pulling back the curtains just a wee bit, I would love to talk about music that you grew up on, the bands that you first were attracted to, the first concerts that you attended. I don't know that you were seeing concerts regularly when you were a kid, at least as much as I saw as a kid growing up in the New York City, Philadelphia area. So let's go back to a bit of histrionics and where did your musical education begin?
I grew up in a home where I was the little one. I grew up with my mom and my older brother, and he was 13 years older than I was. So when I was a very small kid, he was a teenager. So we had a fantastic influx of teenage culture in our home. And my mom was a very liberal, open-minded woman. So there were very little censorship. And I mean this from a very, very positive point of view. But I was immediately exposed to, rock music and pop music and television and news and movies. And I was, as far as I remember, and I think she's truthful, and as that is according to my memories of it as well.
Mm-hmm.
I was never spoken to really as a child.
Yeah.
I was very well aware of what was going on in the world. I mean, obviously, I didn't know the minutiae of the details, but I definitely knew when I was 5 years old. I knew who Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher were, and I knew that there was a war in Iran and Iraq, and the stuff like that. I watched the news, and we were watching. So there was always radio and stereo and TV on, and we had an VCR quite early on as well. So there was a lot of video, VHS sort of coming through, and I watched whatever everyone else was watching. And
Were there any artists in particular that you gravitated towards even at a young age?
well, I've always been a great fan of songs, radio songs. And I mean, this was the mid 80s. So if you threw a glance at whatever was popular in like 1984, I will have very great memories of those songs. They will have most likely have had some sort of importance in my life. I'm talking about Moonlight Shadow. I'm talking about like Nick Kershaw, The Riddle, stuff like that. Everything that was sort of on the radio, Men at Work, stuff like that. I still love that sort of mid 80s radio pop. But my brother, my mom, she's born in 1942, so she is a part of the 60s. She gave me the whole Beatles, Stones, Pink Floyd, Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, all that. Whereas my brother, he was very much into punk rock, but also hard rock music. He loved AC/DC, he loved Rainbow, Motorhead, Metallica. But he was also a very, very big fan of like Sex Pistols, Ramones, and you name it.
That's about as well-rounded a musical education as somebody was going to get in those years, I think.
Yeah, the one thing that I really gravitated towards, the first record that I ever got was from my brother. He had bought Love Gun by Kiss. And I must have been about 3 at the time. And I just immediately took that record. I don't know if it was not only the Monsters, but probably because there was a heck ton of chicks on it. And,
By the way, I'm sorry to interrupt. did your brother keep? Did you have at that time the pull-out from the album that was the
gun?
cardboard gun that bang? You
It
remember
was
that?
not on it.
Oh,
so
too bad.
I have suspected later that it was probably a so-called pre-loved record. I think he bought it. It was probably used.
Right. Yeah.
But I got it from him. He was just like, you probably like this better than I. You seem to like it more than I do. And he was not a big Kiss fan, so he just gave it to me. And and he just bought a lot of records. And some records that he bought, he just handed over to me. So at the same time, basically, around that time, 83, 84, he also gave me Stay Hungry, Twisted Sister,
Yeah.
and Shout at the Devil. So those were my 3 first records.
Now, at what point, Tobias, do you start to realize that not only do you enjoy this stuff, but you'd actually like to create it yourself?
Immediately at that point, when I was that little, I started dressing up. He since he was a punk, he was a punk rocker, so he had like belts with spikes on it and all kinds of paraphernalia that you could dress up with. And he was a very sweet guy because he took a lot of care of me. He was babysitting me a lot, and he would dress me up with his stuff, and I have photos at home when I'm 3-4 years old and dressed up in his stuff, and like a combination of, because I wanted to look like Dee Snider and Nikki Sixx. So I have like mom's stockings on and all the stuff that sort of in one way or another sort of looked like the stuff
Sure.
that they had on.
Yeah.
And they also had like high heel boots. And this, I mean, in the beginning of the 80s was it's sort of close to the 70s. So, I dug through mom's closet and found like similar high sort of over the knee boots.
Sure.
That I sort of could climb into.
Get that glammy thing going.
Yeah. And, I used to jump around on our couch and I had a broom that vaguely looked like a Flying V guitar. Kind of like the one that
Paul Stanley.
well, not Paul Stanley had, but actually Vinnie Vincent had. That is sort of
Oh,
a half
yeah,
V
yeah.
that with the bigger
Yeah.
the one spike above being slightly bigger than the one underneath. And I used to. My mom had knitting sticks. And we had a sort of our couch was not a Chesterfield, but it looked like a Chesterfield. So it had like when it's sort of little bumps on it, a Chesterfield couch, and that sort of not only did it look like, but it also sounded a little bit like a drum kit. So you could sort of boop 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 boop.
Da-da-da, love gun.
Oh yeah. That was definitely one of the first like ba 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 ba.
It's a great drum riff. One of Kiss's best.
Yeah. So I definitely started my first steps as a musician was beating up our couch.
On that, we'll close the segment. Tobias Forge of Ghost is my guest. I'm Lou Brutus. We're here in the HardDrive Radio Studios in New York City.